This next question is, have you looked into 5G? Based on my research for the past couple of years, it seems that this is a weapon system that is being deployed throughout the world. Can you speak on this? For sure, I can speak on 5G. I believe that anything that is powerful can be used as a weapon. I also know that anytime that you're cranking up the frequencies, you can basically roast things around you. So the frequency spectrum of 5G is for sure something to be concerned about, especially when it comes to the grid going on around you. And I got to take this in a step-by-step process, because the physical ramifications, like will it make you sick, would be one thing, because that has to do with your resilience. Like some folks can eat Cheetos, Doritos, hot sauce, and all sorts of stuff and not feel anything. So it'll be the same thing for those kind of people with the whole 5G thing. They may not feel actually any effects of what's going on with it, versus someone who is really in tune with their body and actually in tune with subtle fields. They will actually even see, like I used to see when I was around a lot of internet in the city, I could see the grid. Like even when I woke up in the morning, I could see the grid. But now that I'm out in nature, I don't really see it. And it's because we cover up the Wi-Fi with well, it's not a bunch of Wi-Fi's going on anyway. It's just mine. And then when I'm not using it, I do my best to cover it up. But it's not as strong as what will be going on in the city with all these Wi-Fi's and satellites and radio stations and all this stuff, all using the grid. And because all those frequencies are coursing down those lines of the grid, visually it's easier to see, especially when you're waking up and your eyes are just adjusting. You can actually see the grid. And that grid is the technological field that we have built based on these internet connections and all these different things. When you go into nature, the grid at that one specifically is gone. You're dealing with more of an organic grid then. Okay, so what 5G is going to do and is doing now is it is not only opening up the wavelength. Okay, and now since the human body is on a wavelength specifically, and actually the entire spectrum, the human body has a correspondence to each of those spectrums. 5G actually allows the ability of interfacing into more of those spectrums. And so we talked about before in the past about how sometimes you can wake up early in the morning and then this song is in your mind and you can't seem to get rid of this song and you weren't even really thinking about the song. And we were able to sync and decode that that was because more than likely that song was being spun on a major radio station, that the station number or the frequency or the bandwidth that the station is using is actually right around that same channel of where your mind is as far as what you're receiving through your receptor, especially within the third ear. And then now because you've picked that up, even though it's on a more subtle channel, you now start thinking it's one of your ideas and you start singing the song. Okay, so we already were able to sync that. And so with 5G, you can imagine that this kind of goes to HD at that level, meaning that even what you think are your thoughts and what you think you feel could be directly a part of what is being broadcasted across that field. Now, I don't want people to go into some kind of fear factor because this has already been happening. It happens through the cathode ray tubes in the TV. And it just comes down to exactly how firm you are on your foundation and how strong your mind is. And we talked about this in ambassador training, but people who are weak-minded, people who don't know who they are, and people who are confused all the time, those are the people that are easily able to take suggestions from things that are floating around that they think are a part of their consciousness. Versus people who are very solid within their space, are planted in this present and are truly awake. It definitely happens less, if at all, for them, where they're confusing their thoughts with things that are going on around them. And so we discussed about why it's so important to know yourself, to know your uniqueness, and we discussed techniques on how to do that. And again, so if you're into all this stuff, definitely jump into ambassador training, because that's where the deep dive goes on. It's impossible for us to deep dive in such and at this frequency, meaning one time a week, but we do our best. So I try to get as much of the information out to you as I can. So again, so this is what we're talking about with 5G, and this all rolls into the singularity. It all rolls into ray tracing. If you don't know what ray tracing is basically a way to render what you would see as perfect resolutions in a fraction of the time that it would normally take to render that same resolution. So if you know anything about, let's say, graphics, design, video production, etc., there's this process that's called rendering. Even in game design and programming, there's this process that's called rendering. And all it means is how long it takes for the code to be read so that whatever is in the code can be displayed to you. And this has kind of been the hang up of many of the different games and platforms and even the apps and things that we have because of the technology that we're using. It could not formulate what the code is saying fast enough. So you would get this kind of delay. And this delay would literally, just like any reverb from a device or whatever, it would let you know that, hey, you're kind of dealing with something that is artificial or fake or programmed. But the more that delay is reduced, it's also called latency. This is like if, let's say, you're wearing a VR helmet or virtual reality helmet and or audio device or whatever, and there's latency in there, you could turn your head like this, and then there'll be a time before the whole thing shifts. Right? And when they can decrease that latency, which they've been working on and been doing now, even with some of the new devices, it actually makes things feel more real. So when you reach your hand out, the less latency there is, the more you start feeling like you're really there. And this is also why 5G is so instrumental for these kind of technologies, is because you also need a fat bandwidth, meaning a lot of just direct internet connection, if you may, to transfer this data so fast that those that are using it experience what they're trying to experience within an instant. Now, of course, now this is like trying to be sold as ways to watch videos faster and stuff like that, but obviously we're watching videos fast enough. This is really about creating technologies that are not only communicating with each other in real time, but are also even projecting in real time. And this is a big part of the unfolding of what goes on in 2020 as the technology keeps petaflopping or going in itself in its own way quantum, as people dive more into the simulation, as the book is Simulation and Simulacra that Neo was holding, that he put the key or the code in. And the simulation is basically an alternative reality that is fake. So once again, I'll speak to that idea of soulless beings. The soulless beings are the simulations inside of the false realities that are going to be created to immerse people in like virtual reality. But this is why they want to bring this concept now that there's soulless beings here, because there's a constant concept that they keep trying to sell that this is a simulation and this is false. That is to get you to forfeit your real reality, to pass it off as if it's fake. So that way you think that it's expendable and that going to get another one. And then also it becomes very entertaining for you to submerge yourself deeper into a simulation that they're working around the clock on creating, meaning that this simulation is no different. And I just want to make this all very clear. I don't want to give you any of this hocus pocus alien across the universe kind of shit, excuse my language, that we've been dealing with from many of these spiritual teachers that are just confused about all of this. And they don't know whether to make heads or tails of it because they're listening to all this different information, but they're not going through the actual experiences. So I'll just make it very clear for you. Or they just don't have a grip on VR and technology, AR, augmented reality, and all that kind of stuff. Because after all, who's studying metaphysics and also studying that to see what the connections are? That's what I get into, though. I have to let everything become balanced by showing it's as above, so below nature with things. So let's just talk very briefly about the simulated reality. So right now, around the clock, what is being worked on is a way to immerse you. This is what they call total immersion. To immerse you into another reality like a sim or a simulator. That's what The Sims was about, a simulation. To where you create another life there, also called half-life, the fallout of radiation. Another life there, and you start living there the way that you feel like that your life should be. Because in the real world, if you may, which is they're trying to convince you is a simulation. In the real world, you don't have the resources, the wherewithal, the technical talent, and whatever else they want to hang over your head to be able to stack up to getting the things that you want in this reality. Not to mention the things that you should really want in this reality are sometimes dictated to you, and your uniqueness is not seen as the most valuable thing, so it also feels like you're lacking something. when truly your uniqueness is the most valuable thing. It's rare. It's even what these factions that I'm speaking of are trying to expunge from you, from your conversations and from your posts and all that, because all of us have it. We have different fingerprint. Somebody even mentioned a birthmark in their questions. We have sometimes birthmarks. All the birthmarks are different. So we have this part of us that's so rare that it's even more rare than gold. It's more rare than anything else. And because the planet bases its currencies and bases its commodities on rarity, meaning gold wouldn't be expensive if we had more of it. Diamonds wouldn't be expensive if they didn't make them seem like they were so rare, which they actually are not. So the most rarest thing within the entire cosmos is each individual's uniqueness. And the only thing that some of the people that are in this reality, if you want to call them malevolent, are trying to do is convince you that that is not worth anything, that you don't have any worth. Okay. And then what this then leads to is you wandering outside to try to find something that can authenticate worth for you. Okay. And that you're important. And I just want to slow down on this because I got infinity, so I don't need to speed up on this. It's important that you understand how this whole thing is going to roll out. So you even see it now. This is why you have so many of the youth playing games. Okay. And this is like, we have a massive chunk of the population. It could be possibly 60 to 70% of our youth playing games. And now why some of these games would help with what you call brain, mind, cognizance, and all these kind of things. The greater chunk of them is actually like Witcher and all these kind of games and Vice City are immersing them into worlds that don't teach them anything and are not actually trying to get them to become better people or any of that. But there's large concentrations. If you go on Twitch right now, Twitch TV, and you see the numbers, you got 75,000 people watching a live stream. Right now, we got about 500? That is a far cry to 75,000. So if you imagine that 75,000 people are viewing one thing and only 500 people are viewing another, which one do you think is going to be more of a part of the future unless somebody embeds a quantum solution that shifts those numbers, at least to make them balance? So while you may think that everybody is thinking like you, wants this better future where we're all integrated more with nature and learning more about ourselves organically and unlocking our physical abilities, where really our physical, mental, spiritual abilities, where really the reality is, because those are our children that are still looking to get some assistance and looking for something for us to create that'll be entertaining for them enough, but also a conduit to where they can get out of what they're involved in and get into something else that's equally, again, as entertaining. So what's happening again with those children is that that's the majority. And conscious people, quote unquote, conscious people, conscious community are sitting back here still thinking that the idea of going into a greater level of self is the majority, but that's not the case. Our children make up the majority. And what they're saying right now, based on their actions and based on the energies that they're being surrounded by all the time within the games and the TV and all this kind of stuff, is that they want more of a simulation. They want things that they can get immediately. They want immediate gratification. They want upgrades. And so this is why, as the future keeps going in this direction, it will head there. We just got to understand what percentage of the reality is going to go in that direction. Is it going to be more because there was no quantum solutions embedded by the metaphysical societies to actually assist on this area? Or is it going to be less people because people couldn't get it together fast enough and realize what was really at stake here? But it's still going to go on, is what I'm saying. And what is it? A simulation that is created where a person can immerse themselves, whether it's VR or even something else that has less latency. They get into this reality. The reality is ray traced, and unique identities, which is basically you cloned as a code. Even Sevan Bomar, even Pamela Anderson, even Giselle Bunchkin, whatever you can think of, there will be a clone of in the simulation. And they will even act very similar to those people because it's their data that is being used to form the simulation. But remember, not everyone can be with Sevan Bomar. Not everyone can be with Pamela Anderson. So the simulation is going to appeal to so many people because they're going to get a chance to be with Pamela Anderson, and maybe even engage in even sexual things with this ray traced character that they've been fawning over for their entire lives. Okay, so do you see how? And we're not on the brink of this. This technology is already deployed. Neuralink is like this on steroids, even to get people into a ray traced reality and actually begin to project images to them that actually look so real. And when they reach out their hands and touch, this is why on Kickstarter, you find some of the biggest Kickstarting projects right now are these suits where even when, let's say if you're playing a killing game and you get shot, you feel the impact, boom, 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 boom. You know, why would you want something like that? But it's not just you that is in consideration here. It's actually this massive group of upcoming, like they say, the biggest demographic that you have emerging is the 26-year-old Chinese male, right? And then right next to that, you have the Indian. And then, because these are larger populations, so while you're sitting in your secularism sometimes and not seeing the world, you don't realize that it's actually up to billions of people within only a certain age range that like a certain kind of thing. Anime, you know, just naked pictures of girls. Like you could never push one of these things off on us when we were younger. Now it's like they're finding some kind of attraction within the tune, okay, and the frequencies. Right? And this is what we're looking at. This is like something that, as a singularity is, we're going to have to confront. So it's better to start becoming aware of this now rather than for it to happen and then for us to be like let's say our grandparents. Why are they doing that? They done lost their mind. And each generation, we look at the next generation. Why are they doing that? They done lost their mind. Not realizing that this is a reoccurring scenario where one of the generations just needs to sober up and say, this is exactly what we're going to be dealing with. And this is what we're going to create that is going to cut that off at the pass. And also thinking about what is their minds like? What are they trying to enjoy? What are they really looking for in this? What happened to them? Who sold that to them like that? So all those components must be considered. That's what's called quantum. You need to consider several things before you start deploying the real answer to it. So again, simulation is on the horizon, and there are more people than you think that want to be a part of a simulated reality versus their own real world. They sit in the room all day. The lights are low. They don't exercise. They don't have a significant other, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a physical one. They're dating people online. They have friends that they hang out with online. And then that is, again, the slippery slope into when they deploy the simulation and the technology like Ready Player One, where a person can just jump in there. The next thing is obviously jobs in VR. They're on the brink of that. The things that I'm actually even talking about, even companies may be sitting back there like, geez, George, we need to get caught up. We didn't even think about that. You know, it's just like the gift and the curse to having this level of knowledge of where you can see the future. Jobs in VR. This is because most people shop online already. But as the virtual reality systems become more cheap, but most importantly, because there's a bandwidth and there's right now a bandwidth and technical issue that they're putting out there. It doesn't really exist, but they're saying, well, you got to have a fast running computer and we need devices that you wear on your head that move faster, right? That's just all about them deploying that technology. When that technology is deployed, more people are now into these simulated worlds. Even through the PlayStation has a VR headset. So then when they get in there, now when you go into Nike, you can go to Nike with 50 of your friends, all after a podcast, and then you can see their avatars or characters. This is why Facebook has gotten into this. Facebook owns Oculus. So they have an idea of putting your virtual character into virtual reality so that you can shop. And then you would have a virtual attendant, a girl of some sort or a guy that They're made up simulated character. They got abs, they got the new clothes on, but they don't got to buy any of this stuff except for a fraction of what it would cost in the real world. And that's how the simulation becomes appealing. And inside of that simulation, people start forgetting about who they were and what goes on out in the external reality. And this becomes very similar to how even fake news and things like that work. It becomes like, pay attention to this and, learn so much about this and be a part of this. And then the real thing that you should be paying attention to, the real thing that you should be learning about, which is yourself, it starts to become obsolete or obscure. And that's what we're talking about here, that is coming and is already here. And that's what we're also preparing for better or worse, whether we could do something about this, which we're always trying to deploy technologies ourselves, because technology only means anything external to you. We're trying to deploy things that actually head this off at the pass. But I'm one voice. I'm over here with an average of about 2,000 views per conversation. I'm sitting at about 100,000 subscribers after 10 years and about $70,000 to deploy something that already cost me $180,000 more or less. So when we're talking about, well, how do we get things done? It's almost like also in this, you see how in these corporations, they got headhunters. They literally go and find the people that they feel like are capable of doing the job that they need to get done. The conscious community is like, we got to wake up to the reality that if we can actually trust someone and they have a track record for actually being able to accomplish something, then we should actually give them the resources then that is necessary to deploy the things that we feel like are a part of our collective ideals of what we want to see in the future. But we're getting to that right now. We haven't actually got there yet. But as a living human being, a real creation within this platform itself called Earth, me, myself, I'm experiencing all this in real time just like you. So it really becomes like just becoming aware of things, seeing what's going on around me. And then instead of like going into some stage of depression, which some of this stuff could be a bit depressing, doing the best that I can to deploy solutions right now based on what I have at my disposal, and then doing my best, trying to teach myself as many skills as I can. Because remember, I'm not coming from like this graduate degrees and all this physics and all this kind of stuff, which is probably the benefit for me at this stage, because I'd probably be compartmentalized. But anything that I need to learn, even if it's marketing or even if it's things that are going to change with technology, I have to go every single day and learn this stuff. Then I have to actually come back here and not just explain to you, but also to be a real solution, because I don't like just talking about stuff. I got to then go and deploy the technology. So I got to go and link with developers. I got to go doing all of that stuff. And so this is really what I'm inviting everyone to jump in on, like at least assist us with a contribution or something that will allow this to become a reality faster. It's going to become a reality, but it's just like building a house. The more people you have building it, the faster it gets built. But again, if it's just a couple people or a few people in a group, then it's a lot slower. So if you know someone out there and that they've always expressed that they have a desire to and a mission to actually head off at the pass, the destruction of our integrity and of our true culture, our true petri dish, what you were even given, what you grew up with that made you who you are. If you have an interest in preserving that and preserving our youth, get the message out to them. There's 10 years of this. So if it was something that I wanted to go do and deviate from the plan, I had done that stuff a long time ago. I probably did it before I got started, especially since there's not actually that much recognition and that many people that are being, let's say, quote unquote, influenced by what I'm doing here anyway. So that's what I'm just saying. It's maybe one of my rants, but it's just about, hey, I see all this happening and it's like almost like maybe we're like asleep at the wheel sometime, because like we could do so much. You can learn so many things. Do you know, like the library, right, got replaced by the internet? But anytime even you're playing one of these games, like the role-playing games where there's a simulation of a city and you're building a city, when you add a library, it increases the intelligence and the development of everybody that's inside of that city, right? So when you walk into a library in the past, and that's why it's things that we even have now that we're taking it for granted, you got all of these books and all this knowledge. Now, of course, the right knowledge is the most applicable, but it's available for you. Versus 400 years ago, trying to get into a library where there were a massive amount of knowledge was impossible to develop your skills in that way. And so now we have that, and we just complain about something else. So we have to get into a reality of awareness where we realize that we're being encouraged to actually complain about things instead of doing something about them. And so let me just finish off here today. And yeah, I just kind of got a little bit into it as far as, just seeing the future, seeing what's happening, seeing the chumps that are pulling this off. Like, I'm not going to name any names today, just because I just don't want the extra flux. But I'm watching factions actually develop these technologies and sell off their bullshit to everybody. And you can see even by the people that they're around that they have no interest in actually helping humanity. They have interest only in being worshipped. They're always reintroducing technologies that we've even discovered in the past or long ago as if it's brand new and as if it's theirs. And then there's a consistent betrayal all the time that's happening with humanity, that anybody that gets enough wherewithal, enough capital or whatever to start doing something about the situation that we're dealing with, they just go and join the side of the people that are perpetrating the issue just to have their own light and to shine for this momentary period where we can all be shining together.